at any point in time you have, if at any point in time you guys have a question, let's just try to keep it until the end. So the idea is I'll tell you how to build awesome APIs at the beginning, and then we'll go over and look at what Treble essentially does and how can we actually help you through all of those pain points. Anybody have questions before we actually get into it?
I mean, I would say just screenshare and start because like after seeing some data, some information, some ways they might get some questions. And guys, just ask your questions in either Q&A or in the chat section. And after this explanation or once in between, we will take some questions and we will answer. We'll try our best to answer every single question. Let's go with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so let me just share my screen and let's see, essentially, let me guys know when you see my screen.
Yeah, we can see that. Like listeners, let us know in the chat section. Can you see the screen or not? Drop the fire emoji so that we can know that you guys are here and you guys can actually see the screen also. Yes, by the way, I can see the screen, so I believe we can start.
Nice. Okay, cool. So today we're actually gonna talk about how to build amazing APIs, and I've kind of distilled that into 10, what I call the 10 REST commandments, or in translation, how to build an API as a backend developer and still stay friends with the rest of your team. And we are going to be talking about mainly REST API, JSON-based REST APIs. So just so you guys understand who am I and why am I talking to you guys. So I'm Vedran, I'm a full stack developer. I've been a developer for the past 15 years. I really, my passion is PHP, MySQL, HTML, CSS, JS, as well as Laravel. I've been doing this, like I said, for 15 years, and my focus has been Laravel, APIs, and performance optimizations. That is essentially what kind of brings us to why you're all here, and essentially, why am I talking about APIs is Treble. So Treble is our product. You can think of it one-stop shop for your APIs, and we kind of make it super easy to understand what's going on with your APIs and the apps that use them. Like we know some of, I've probably developed like more than 100, 200 APIs. So I know essentially the things that you guys are going through, and we've kind of built a product that helps you address every single one of those problems, in every single step of that journey. So we're gonna start off by essentially thinking about who might use our API. So when you're building an API, it's really important for you to understand who is going to actually be your user. I mean, when you think about it, in the end, it is going to be the end user. So if you're building an app and you guys are building the API, your end user is somebody who's using the app, but you're actually building for a different kind of people. So you're building for testers and QA teams, other backend developers, native mobile developers, or not native mobile developers, front-end developers, product and project managers. So these guys will actually be, the first line of defense, if you will, and you will be interacting with them. Why? When you build an API, you have to give the API to mobile developers so they can integrate it, or front-end developers. Product and project managers will probably tell you how you should build your API. Other backend developers might also do integrations for it. So essentially, when you think about it, you're building for these guys. These are your users, not your your end users. And many of these people or users right here have might be on a different skill level. So what we want to do with our APIs, we want to make sure that we can actually build something that is universally understandable across any role or any skill level. So that being said, we're going to take a look at, what are some of these commandments, and we're going to go through each of them individually. Like I said, there is actually 10 of them. They're very, very easy to digest and understand. And again, the first one is called be practical, second, be methodical, be semantical, be secure, be organized, be consistent, be graceful, be smart, lean, and considerate. So we're going to start with the first one, and it's going to be about being practical, right? So when you think about, an API, most of the REST APIs, if we're building a JSON REST API, what we want to do fundamentally with the API is, respond with the proper header. This is so underrated. And I see so many problems that happen because you are essentially not sending a header of application/JSON to your API. So that little header essentially tells all other people, all other parties, all other clients, hey, this is what I've built. This is how you should treat that as JSON and not XML, not text, not form data, JSON. This is what you should do with that JSON. Again, the reason why I'm highlighting this, it is such a trivial thing to do in any language, but again, most people essentially forget to do that. And why JSON and not XML? JSON is essentially easier to read, write. It takes less space. It's universally supported by every single language. It's basically the de facto standard of building modern day REST API. So the first one is very easy. Remember, when you're in doubt, just use JSON. Just use JSON, return application/JSON, and you will be a much happier guy, and you'll have much happier campers that are integrating your APIs. So the next one, again, very obvious, but for some reason, people tend to, I guess, be afraid of these things. But you see, HTTP has 5 verbs, right? They're called get, post, put, patch, and delete. And usually what happens in most cases, there are developers who basically use 2 of these, or even worse, 1 of these. So I've seen many, many APIs who just use get requests instead of post, put, patch, and delete. And I've also seen a combination of get and post. So the reason why these are very, very important to understand as well as use is essentially, they have a meaning. Somebody who is learning REST, somebody who's developing an API in China, in India, in Croatia, might not speak English. They still understand what get, post, put, patch, delete means. It is one of those universally accepted things, and every single developer understands it. Does not matter what language are you using in terms of programming, as well as what language are you actually speaking. So the first one is, of course, the get HTTP method. You should think of that and use that only for reading data, right? So if you're trying to get something, that's, the name itself implies what you should be doing. So when you say get articles, get article, that means you are essentially reading data back from the server, nothing else. The next one that, I see, let's say, overused is the post one. That is usually when you're actually storing data. So people use post to update data, partially, fully delete, but theoretically the HTTP, headers, HTTP verb was designed to actually just store data. Now, if you're storing data, that means this operation is not safe and it is destructive, whereas the get method is safe and non-destructive. What does that mean? You can call a get method 50 times in a row and it will always return the same result. But if you call any of the post or delete methods, they will not have the same result, because essentially you might be destroying something. You're creating something or deleting something, depending on what you're doing. Put, you can think about put as updating data, but you're essentially expecting to update absolutely everything, whereas patch, you only updates parts of the data. So if you have, let's say, a model and you want to just replace the entire model, you would use put, or you would use patch if you want to update the address or the last name of the user. And finally, the last one is delete. Essentially, that is, as the name implies, meant for deleting data. So if you're trying to delete something, you should theoretically use the delete HTTP verb. And again, it is very simple. You've got only 5 of them. You should learn them. You should do when you should use each of those, and you construct and build your APIs using one of these 5, not just get or not just post. The next one we're going to take a look at is called being semantical, right? So semantics are actually very, very important, right? And there are a couple of things that we should kind of use here and follow a pattern that other people will understand. The number one thing that you should do when naming your API endpoints or even the rest of your API structure is you should use nouns, right? So if we take a look at, get users or post users or get users 23, put users 23, all of these are nouns, right? And more importantly, they are in plural instead of singular, right? And there's a good reason for that. And that one is essentially when you're making a get request to user, you already have a verb, because get, post, put, patch, deletes are actually verbs in English language. So when you do a get request to /users, you're essentially telling the world, hey, I'm getting users, right? And the reason why you use plural is because you can actually keep your URL structure the same for all operations. What does that mean? If you do a get request to /users, that means you're essentially getting a bunch of users. If you do a post request to users, that means you want to create a user. If you want to get a specific user, you should follow a pattern of get users and then the ID or UUID, right? So in every single situation, we can always use plural, and it makes much more sense. One of the other things that you should definitely try to use is single word instead of multi-word. So for example, here we've got a situation where we want to get comments for a given user. And here I've used essentially user and then, comments. That's kind of bad. You should try to separate these things with actual slashes or URL parts. So to translate this one, it would be get user /ID /comments. So that is something that you should watch out. And preferably, you should use snake case over other cases, because URLs at the end of the day are much more easier to read when you're using snake case. And Stripe uses them, Facebook uses them, PayPal uses snake case. All of these bigger guys essentially use snake case. So about being semantical, very simple. Try to keep your API naming, API endpoint naming up on point. Use nouns, use plurals, use single words, and you will have a much better API than you usually would. Now, the next one, we're going to talk about being secure. So this is like a very hot topic, if you will, in the API space and generally in IT nowadays. Everybody wants to do, something to improve their security. Now, again, you wouldn't believe how many APIs fail at basically the basics, if you will. So we're going to cover a couple of these and we're just going to run through them. So essentially, if you're not using HTTPS in 2021, then, all I can say is shame on you. It is literally simple. It is free. You can literally get HTTPS or an SSL certificate on every single major cloud provider for free, right? AWS, Azure, GCP, Cloudflare, everybody will give you a certificate for free. If you're using SSL, you are immediately 100 times more secure, because you can avoid man-in-the-middle attacks, you can avoid data sniffing, and a lot of these things. So essentially, your data communication via HTTPS is encrypted, whereas via HTTP it is not encrypted. The second thing that most API developers actually fail is, they're not using any form of authorization. Now, why is authorization important? That kind of, when you add authorization to your API, you essentially control who gets access to your API. And you should think of your API, if you think of your API as a house, you probably have a door on your house, and that door has a key, and you just don't, you select who you're going to give the key to that door to. So essentially, if we apply that rule to your API, you add authorization, you then control who has access, which means you can easily revoke that access, right? So if somebody becomes a bad actor, they start doing, things that you don't like or are not good, you can easily revoke that access. Another thing that you should, use as soon as possible, and literally, you know, is so easy to switch, but means a lot, is not exposing your IDs. So as we know, many of us, the purpose of an API is to communicate to a database, and a database has a lot of IDs, right? And if you're exposing your IDs, you're essentially telling the world, hey, I stored this user under this ID, and if you want to know what the ID of a previous user is, that's just -1 or +1 for the next one. If you're using UUIDs, they are much more safer and much more complicated to guess, almost impossible, literally. So essentially, just replace headers, just replace IDs with UUIDs. You don't even necessarily have to have like a special column in your database that's going to have UIDs. There are packages for almost every language that are going to convert an ID to a UUID, and you can handle that on a code level. Now, one of the more easier things to do, and again, this is somewhat specific to your programming language, but let's say Apache, the world's most famous HTTP server, by default has a couple of signatures, headers, if you will, that send data about your server. So for example, by default, they send server signature and server tokens headers that literally tell somebody else, hey, I'm using this version of Apache, this version of PHP, this version of Node. So if you just simply remove those and unset those you'll be much safer. And if somebody wants to hack you, they at least won't know, hey, they're using this version. I'm going to go online and look for exploits for that version. So at least you're going to make their job much harder. And finally, of course, updates. I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but you should try to keep your dependencies updated. I've seen horror stories of keys getting leaked, data getting leaked, everything essentially getting leaked because of broken or outdated dependencies. For the next one, we are going to talk about being organized. So this, I cannot overstate this. You should just, when we're talking about organization and APIs, that means essentially that you should just use versioning. The sooner you start versioning, the better your life will be later on, right? Then personally, to always use versioning, because when you think about versioning, you always think about version 1, 2, 3, these bigger versions, but that doesn't necessarily need to be like that. You could version an API to version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, or even smaller, right? I wouldn't necessarily go more than 2 digits because I think that is fine, but start early, enforce versioning, keep it simple, and adapt it to your needs. The most common way of essentially, using versions in your API is via URL. So as you can see here, I've got version 1, 1.2, 1.45, and version 2. Why is versioning super, super important? Let's say you deploy something today, you have an app running, it is in production, it is on the App Store, on iPhone, on Android, on all of these bigger providers. And let's say you have a model for a user that returns a certain field that today might be an integer, right? And you might even just update the MySQL version on your server, which kind of will control, for example, how the data is returned by your programming language. So that actually might change, right? So you're now stuck with a broken app, and if people don't update, you might be in a problem. So as soon as you release, for example, a production version of your website, I would suggest, or the app, I would suggest essentially doing another version. So start working on the next update for the API on another version, and you always leave this version behind. Again, I'm mostly mentioned versioning via URIs or URLs, but you could also use request headers, query parameters, or even content negotiation. A couple of more before we kind of move into learning more about how actually Treble can help you. One of the things that people very easily forget to do is to be consistent. And the way I kind of feel about it is consistency is literally what transforms you from average into excellent, right? And that means you as a developer as well as you as your API, right? So the first and foremost thing when I talk about consistency and API is the resources or the models that you're returning in some of these scenarios, and then naming, which we've covered, URLs, HTTP codes, and similar. So your goal is to essentially always send the same resource structure. For example, let's take a look at this. We've got a single article on the left side, which, for example, has the title, the description, UID, and a comments array, right? So if I'm a mobile developer, I'm going to take a look at this. I might take a look at this example. I'm going to assume that I'm always going to get a comments array. And I'm going to assume that this is an array every time I get it. If I don't get an array, everything's going to break, right? So that's at least how mobile developers and front-end developers think. So if you don't return the comments array, if you don't have comments or you don't want to load them because you want to save some database queries on a list of comments like this, you should always at least try to put an empty array, right? So the idea is always try to return something, even if it's empty, just trying to keep it consistent. Because a mobile developer is going to see this and he's gonna get a comments array, and he's not gonna do anything in this scenario because there are no items in the array. But if you did not return this, things might have broken for them, especially in very sensitive languages like Kotlin or even some of the Swift stuff that Apple is doing. So again, be consistent. Always return the same models for all your resources. That is your number one goal. And then secondly, try to keep a clean, a consistent naming structure so people can predict, even if they're not sure how you built an API. Even if I don't know, for example, that we might have a posts resource, I might guess that, or if you don't document how to get one post, if I see that I can get posts, I can assume that you've done posts / UID. That is because, I have an expectation that you've done this consistently. Now, we've got a couple of more to go over. This one is gonna a really funny one. Be graceful, and things fail. That's fine. What matters is how we handle it, right? So there are essentially a couple of things that we can do when things go wrong, and trust me, things will go wrong, right? So it's not about will I make a perfect API that will never crash? That's not going to happen. You will always have problems. The only thing that matters is how do you handle it. So again, we come back to how smart HTTP is, because they've again built a very nice mechanism, just like they did with get, post, put, patch, so that a developer in China or a developer in Germany will both understand if you send a status code of 401, which means unauthorized, they will know what that is, right? So, for example, if a code, if something happens, let's say a validation error, somebody forgot to insert their email address and they're trying to log in, you want to return an error of 4xx, meaning in that range of 400, which will indicate anybody in the world, especially many of the, SDKs, many of the packages that essentially handle API responses on a mobile level or on, for example, a front-end level. They will understand, hey, okay, I got an error code of 400. That means something is wrong. I'm not going to proceed into doing what I was supposed to do. So essentially, the only thing you need to do is you need to properly label your HTTP response codes, right? So if it's a success, return something in the 2xx range. If essentially if you're trying to do a redirect, do 3xx. If there is a client error, then tell them, hey, this is an error. This is what I think the error is. this is why I think it is, and return them 4xx or anything else. If you, on the other hand, have caused the error, that means the error is going to be in the 500 range, and so on and so forth. So these are things that are universally understood across the entire planet. And if you just use them, your job is going to be much more easier. Now, one of the things that you should also try to do is try to predict where others will fail and provide them with extreme details. I'm telling you this because it'll make your job easier as a developer. In most cases, they will try, their inclination when something goes wrong is, I'm going to ask the guy who built the API. If you provide them with a JSON that tells them exactly what went wrong, they won't ask you that question. So essentially, you can think of an API, it's like an elaborate scheme of not being asked questions. So the better you do these things, the less questions you'll have to answer. And one of the things that again, we come back to one of the rules from before, consistency. If there is an error, always try to be consistent in terms of how you respond to errors. Now, the last three are, being smart. So if you think about, a modern day API or the role of the API, essentially API is the brain of the entire operation of your application, platform, product, whatever it is that you're building. API is literally in the center of it. The first thing you should do as an API, if you will, is to protect your most valuable asset. And that most valuable asset is actually your database, right? Because you are in charge of the data that gets stored into your database as well as that gets pulled into it. So you should keep that, process very sacred, right? So you shouldn't store something that is invalid. If you get for example, if you get a phone number that is not formatted as you want, the API is there to kind of prepare it for the database and essentially make sure that you actually store it in a database in a very good manner. So at the same time, you're being forgiving to your users who will make mistakes, and you're correcting them on the API side. The third thing any good API will do is essentially it will handle any complicated process on its own, and it won't depend on clients to help. So what does that mean? So for example, let's say you have user registration inside of your system. When somebody calls your endpoint to create an account, you, instead of having them call like 3, 4, 5 more API endpoints to send an SMS message, to send an email, or to do something else, you should do all of that inside of one API call. That is, why you handle everything. And that is the easiest way to update. So if tomorrow you change that process, you just update everything on the API side and you're good to go. So another thing that people forget to do is make sure that the API is optimized for cross-platform solutions. So for example, one common scenario is image resizing. So you might have an API that returns a bunch of images or image URLs, right, to an application. That application might be used on your smartwatch, on your mobile phone, on a tablet, on a TV. And if you think about it, the resolution of the image that you send on a mobile phone and a TV shouldn't be the same. You shouldn't send like 5,000 times 5,000 pixels of an image to your mobile phone. You could probably get away with like 1,000 times 1,000. So what you should do is, you should be prepared for these cross-platform solutions. You should be the one who's optimizing and preparing these image URLs using on-the-fly image resizing or something like that. Again, this is just one example, but another that I can think of is trimming the length of the content. So for example, if you're sending, have a bunch of articles and you're always sending only 3 lines, that might be too little for a TV and too much for a phone. So you should, tell the client, hey, tell me who you are. And then the API is going to, return a dynamic variable amount of data to you. That's at least what a smart API would do. And of course, the less you depend, the less you're dependent on the client, the better the things will be. And that's simply because when you think about a client, a mobile app, a website, you don't control that. The only thing you control is the API. And the fastest thing, when a problem happens, the fastest thing for you to do is just fix it on the API side. If you have to involve anybody else, that means you're probably going to have to spend a lot more time with other people trying to figure out what is wrong. So try to, again, make your life easier. Now, the last two things, one of them is be lean. So, every API that you're building should essentially be fast and optimized, and that starts on a database level. You should cover up the basics, optimize your database structure, queries, and every single thing that kind of interacts with your database. Another really cool guiding principle: the less data you send, the faster you are. If you think about it, it's very simple. Don't send much data, things will be faster. Use things that kind of compress data if you can. Make your life easier by using gzip or some kind of other content encoding method like Broadly or whatever. And use modern day services like, for example, Cloudflare or AVS, who by default have caching enabled, compression enabled, and some of these things that help you deliver API responses much faster. Now, the final thing, again, is about being considerate. Now, this is, I would say, a more philosophical one, but, developing APIs for us backend developers is essentially pretty lonely. And at the beginning, it's actually very lonely. But remember, there's a slew of people that are waiting on you and depending on you to do a good job. So, think of it this way. When you do your job and build an API, there's literally a line of people behind you that depend on how good you've done your job, right? So try to understand what they need to do, what they are going through, and what they need, right? And try to predict that and try to build, something that will allow them to better understand what you're trying to do, and also use tools like the one that we're gonna start talking about right now. So we've kind of now gone through all of these, really amazing rules on how to build these APIs. Now I can show you a tool that's gonna help you and your entire team not just build these guys faster, but also understand when a problem occurs. You'll all be able to understand why, how, and so on and so forth. So I actually have our website Treble enabled, and like I said, you can think of Treble as a way of understanding your APIs, and you can think of it as your companion when you're building an API. And one of the first things that you have to do in order to make Treble work is, of course, create an account, which I already did. I'm logged into my account. The next thing you need to do is create a project. So think of a project like an API, right? So let's say we create a PitchGround project, PitchGround API, and let's say we know that the API URL is API, pitchground.com. So we enter the base URL, and what we can do right now is we can invite the rest of our team. So we can invite our mobile developers, we can invite our other backend developers, everybody, literally. So I just type in the email of my colleagues, and I can actually finish and save a project. So what this will do is it will take me to the instructions page where it will tell me how I can add Treble to my API. And we've got like a slew of programming languages, everything from Node.js, Express, Symfony, Laravel, .NET, whatever you guys are using, we have it. So if you're developing an API in Node.js, just run npm install Treble and copy paste a few of these lines of code. And that's it. If you do this, you will immediately get real-time API monitoring, automatically generated documentation, API analytics, one-click testing, everything, absolutely everything you and your team need to figure out some of the things that I've talked about earlier much faster. So we can actually take a look at how does that look when you actually do this. So I'm on my dashboard. I have like 31 APIs that have 5,000 endpoints, 4.5 million requests, and 300 problems. And essentially, this is what you'll get. You'll get an overview of how your APIs are doing, and you can even see how individually each of them are actually doing. So for example, this API is called the demo API. This is the base URL. This is how many endpoints it has. This is how many requests, how many problems, and what the Treble score of that API is. When you have multiple people on the project, you can actually see all of those people at the bottom of the page. Now we're going to go quickly jump into one of these projects, and let's see what actually Treble offers us when you actually enable. So when you arrive on this page, I'm just going to highlight this little API call. As you can see in real time, a new API call appeared as I was talking, which is the whole purpose of Treble. So you essentially add one little tiny SDK on top of your API, and you get to see all the requests in real time as they happen. So if you have users all around the world, you can actually see what they're doing on your API, and you get a bunch of valuable information alongside that. So essentially, if we take a look at the anatomy of what you get, the first thing you get is, whether or not, what kind of HTTP word that is, post, get, we've talked about these. We also tell you, was this request authenticated or not? This way you can immediately know, is somebody being, an asshole and sending something incorrectly, or, they're actually sending the right keys. You also know exactly when the request happened. So for example, this one was a few seconds ago. This one was now 2 minutes ago. One of the other cool things that you actually get is you get the status code. Again, we've talked about this. Since everything went well, that this is 200, which means everything is okay. We also tell you what device this user is using, and we automatically detect these things, right? So you don't have to tell us anything. We'll try to figure it out on our own. We also tell you the location. Again, you don't have to do anything. We figure it out. So if you ever need to debug, or get a request, hey, we have a user from New York using iOS and something isn't working, this is, how you actually see that. We also tell you what the load time is. We'll put it green when it's okay, and we'll also put it red when it's not okay. So you immediately, you and your team know, okay, this is really good, this is really bad, etc., etc. When a problem occurs on your code, we'll also capture that, and we'll be able to tell you, hey, this API request has a problem. We'll send you an email or a push notification as soon as it happens, and you'll be able to see the details of not just the what was sent from the client, but also what the error was, what line of code, and where it happened. So for example, here, you actually get to see the entire payload that was sent from the app, in this case, to your API. Now, because we have access to this, we can actually dive deeper into one of these requests. So we see a request to auth register. Let's click on that one. When we click on it, we actually are taken to a new page where we can actually see the details of that request. So you get the entire request data that was sent and the response data that your API returned to the client. With this, you can actually virtually debug any type of situation or problem, not just code related, but actually data related. So again, when somebody tells you, hey, I tried to log in, but something isn't working, you have no idea what email did they type in. Did they even at all attempt to log in? Are they using an incorrect password? With Treble, you can actually figure all of these things out. So for example, you can see here, we see that the person entered a name, an email, and password. And password is a bunch of stars. That's because we mask sensitive data before it even leaves your server. And we allow you to do this and configure this on every single SDK. So if you want to mask the parameter called name, you can actually do that. From an SDK level, you just add that to the mask list, and that is it. The same works for the response data. So if you mask the password in request, it will also be masked in the response data. Now, another cool thing that we tell you immediately is, is there an authentication on this API request? If so, what it is and what what key was used. This is very useful if you're trying to figure out who is using your API, what are they doing, what client, etc., etc. And again, one of the magical things I would say we do is we automatically generate and update documentation for your API. So you no longer need to spend like weeks writing docs and then updating them. You essentially make one request. We'll turn this into a model as well as the response data, as you can see here. We'll do this for every single request as well as for all the, for the entire API. So we'll keep track how your documentation changes over time as we get more requests. We'll know which documentation is the most popular, the most used one. We'll show you that. We'll also know what the variations are, and we'll be able to, we'll show them to you as well. If you care about headers, this is what you get. You can easily read them right here. For, let's say, your project managers, product managers, QA people, we call this right section the plain English section. Because in plain English, we essentially tell you when this was requested, what is the response code, was it authenticated, yes or no, were there problems, yes or no, what API version are you guys using? So again, we come back to the slides. Very important to use API versions. We automatically detect this for you, so we can tell you which API request was made using which version. Now, a couple of things we do, we also tell you the location of the user. So you can actually see it on a map. You can even click on it. You can also view it on a bigger map, as well as all the device details that your end user is using. In this case, we're talking about an iPhone app. And without you having to do anything, we can tell you which iOS version that person is running on, what is the app name, what is the app version, and the bundle ID. Now, with this information, you can do a lot of things. So you can find people who are using outdated versions of the app. You can find people who might have problems on a certain bundle ID or a certain app version, or even an iOS version. And we do this across iOS, across Android, and all of these other devices. Now, the last thing we kind of do is we tell you what your server environment at that moment in time was. Why do we do that? Well, because sometimes you might do changes on your server, and it's very important for you to understand, hey, what happened? What happened on my server when problems started occurring, or when this occurred? So essentially, we tell you that, and we give you that information. Now, let me just get a sip of water before we continue, and we've got maybe like 10 minutes more, so I'll just run through a couple of these very interesting things.
Sure, no worries. Like, this is really interesting, to be honest.
Okay, cool. So I've just opened like an API called get articles, and as you can see, it's like a pretty large JSON, and we can toggle this JSON on and off. If I don't want to see a user model, I can hide that. If I don't want to see the articles or just count them, you can easily do that. Again, I've talked about documentation, so we take this humongous JSON and turn it into docs, so you can easily understand what happened. Is it okay? Is it not okay? And more importantly, you can just give this to your iOS developer or your front-end developer and tell them, hey, this is what you get from the API. And the way I usually do that is, if I want to communicate to my team member, I just type in their name, which is in this case Tia, and I tell them, hey, take a look at this request, right? And if I comment that, she'll get a notification, which we don't want to do right now. So we're just going to remove her name, and we'll comment like this. And this is going to be written down as a comment on this request. So you can talk to yourself, talk to other people, and explain them anything you might need to explain. Now, we also have this share request feature, which if I copy this link and open a new private window where I'm not logged in, if I visit this link, you can actually see that I get all the details for this request without even having to log in or register. So you essentially are giving somebody access to this request, and they see everything that you see, all the data, except the auth key has been, of course, removed. And what you can do with this is prove somebody, hey, this is what you did, or this is what you didn't do, or even yet, hey, this actually happened, or it didn't happen, or we did this, or you did that. So there's no more, when you're talking to other companies or you're integrating a third-party API, there won't be any more situations where you're like, nobody believes you that you did something correct or incorrect. Here you can have it black and white, as the Americans say. The final thing that I want to show you on this page is, let's say you need to make a test. Usually you'd probably have to fire Postman up. That takes a very long time because Postman is very slow. And you would have to essentially copy paste this URL, copy paste the auth details, copy paste any parameters. We can see that this request was made from Redmond, Washington on iOS. I just click make a test. The test is already done, but I'm just gonna talk you through it. So essentially what happened when I click test is Treble knows all the data that needs to be sent to a URL, how to authenticate, what data to send, what is everything, and it will perform that test for you. So as you can see, I've just tested this API call. The location is this time Zagreb, Croatia desktop, unlike Redmond iOS. And I've literally tested this API call with one click. Nothing, I didn't have to do anything. I just clicked the button, and that's about it. So we save you time on every single time you have to test something. Now, one of the things that I really like is you have all of this data, and you can actually put it to good use by searching for it. So we can start off by saying, give me all the requests that happened today from iOS. Filter, we go in, we'll search 93,000 requests. We'll give you 676 that have actually, happened from iOS today. And let's say we want to find, a specific request from Columbus, or requests from iOS today from Columbus. We start typing the location, we get a suggestion, we click filter, we see, okay, now we're talking 26 requests, right? We can go even deeper. We can specify an endpoint. We can say, give me all the requests that happen from, I don't know, auth to auth register, or something like that on iOS today from Columbus, Ohio. You can go as deep as you want until you find that one request or one person. You can even find different app versions, like I told you. So you can figure out very quickly, okay, I got like a bunch of users who are on app version 132. We can see, that's 21,000 out of 93,000. That's, pretty actually good in terms of app updates. You can easily get to a lot of information on your own. And also we support like wild queries. So I don't know, let's say somebody registered with an email. My favorite scenario for Treble is somebody tells me I can't log in. I just essentially type in their email as a wild search parameter, and we'll go in, we'll search 93,000 requests, and we'll give you that one request and show you what that guy did and what essentially happened. So I got a couple of things to show you. One is endpoints. We've talked about endpoints, and they're essentially crucial for your API. So we get a URL that looks like this, and we convert that into an endpoint, if there is an endpoint to be converted. So we understand how you're building your API, and we can actually dynamically determine what are your endpoints. And why do we do that? Well, because we give you automatically generated and updated documentation. If you click on the documentation tab here, you actually land on our version of the documentation, where you get some statistics, but you also get the base URL, how to authenticate, and we automatically group all of these things for you. So for example, auth register, this is what you send, this is what you will receive, this is what you will receive when it's a 200, when it's a 400, this is how you get user details, this is what you will receive, this is how you favorite things, etc., etc. So you get all of this without having to write anything. More importantly, we fully support OpenAPI spec, so you can actually get started with OpenAPI spec and export this into whatever you want and build, continue building a documentation within like a second with everything prepared. And a couple of more things here. I've told you we keep track of the problems that happen on your code, and we essentially give you a list. Here are all the problems that happen. This is how many times they happen. This is the last time they've happened, and we'll notify you in real time but only once. So for example, this happened 2078 times. I don't want to be notified 2780 times, right? We notified you only once, and we won't notify you until you click mark as resolved. If you click that and that happens again, we'll automatically notify you. So you won't have to worry, you'll never miss anything. A couple of things that I want to show you is the Treble Score. Now, we've talked about the quality of your API and all the 10 commandments. So think of it this way. We took the 10 commandments and built it into the Treble Score. So we actually tell you how good you're doing across performance, security, and quality, right? So we check for gzip support, HTTP support, HTTPS support, auth, and all of these other things. And we tell you exactly how good or bad you're doing in each of these sections, so you know how to fix a problem and become better, right? Because at the end of the day, we all want to become better, and this will tell you, hey, this is how you do it. But more importantly, when you do a good job, you'll be able to prove to your boss, to your company, if you're working for anybody, you'll be able to prove, hey, I did a really good job. This is how it looks like. Now, to wrap all of this up, I wanted to show you two things, right? We have native apps for Android, iOS, as well as Mac. So if I click on this, you can download this, by the way, from the Apple Store or the Android Play Store, right? If I open the app, I can see it's a native app on my Mac, and I get to see alerts. So like I told you, we alert you in real time. Like for example, this one, 3 weeks ago, there was a problem on this API. When I click on it, it takes me directly to the details of that request. You get the data about location, about devices, about the error. You can even run tests from your app. Why is this awesome? Again, if you have an iPhone app, right, or an Android app, you can actually do all of this from there, right? So this is how it looks on a Mac, and this is my phone. I have it mirrored with me. So this is how that looks on a phone. So you can actually view and monitor your API directly from your phone, which, you know, in most cases is actually pretty amazing. And you can see everything that I've just showed you just on the app as well. So for example, we were in the demo API project. We were looking at requests, which is you can do that here. You even have documentation here. You can click on that. I'll open it on the app as well, just so you see it. So I'll go to demo API. You can see the requests as they load. There we go. You see all the requests, all the data directly on your phone. Again, Android, iOS, all of that. More importantly, you can access analytics, right? So if you're on the go, somebody asks you, hey, you know, how many requests are we getting today? Or how many requests have we gotten in the past 30 days, every day? You can actually tell them and give them information about your API, where most of the users are coming from, what are they using, what devices, when in the week, etc., etc. You can also view the Treble Score on the go and everything that you actually need. And my favorite function, again, you can actually, we built in a client that totally replaces Postman, which is super, super fast and allows you to actually test API requests much, much more faster than you usually would. So that's essentially everything I've got to say about, Treble, about APIs, and now it's all about you guys.
Okay, first of all, guys, I would just like to say this was really interesting. Like, the moment you started with those 10 commandments, and I'm like, okay, these are really important to build the API. And then you were like, okay, here's a solution for you guys. You don't have to follow these things every single time. Just use this tool, and boom, you are
Yeah.
following majority of them without even worrying about them on the first place. And I'm telling you guys,
Yeah.
I would personally suggest you guys, if you are into API building, I had dropped the lifetime deal link of Treble application. There are 3 amazing plans with a lot of benefits. Check out, buy the plan which you will require using this link which I dropped right down the chat section, and let us know how have been your experience. And to be honest, I'm just really happy because like like in the end moment when you brought that application of like App Store and Play Store, I'm like, oh my god, this was something which I was not expecting, to be honest. I'm like, okay, this is something really interesting.
Thank you very much. It was again really enjoyed the demo. And again, if you guys have any questions, I'm here for you. If you have questions after essentially this call, I'll just drop in my email, vedran@treble.com. You can ping me there, ask me any question you might have, and I also sure if you contact the PitchGround guys, they'll just forward anything to me. So
Yeah.
anybody have any questions about APIs or anything?
Yeah, so whether like there are two questions. First of all, Dean is talking about like, can you just cover that Go serverless recommendation as it was missed, I believe, like when you were explaining those commandments. Like this is a question from Dean for now.
Yeah, so in terms of serverless, we run our entire infrastructure on serverless, right? So for example, one of the things that you might worry about is, oh, I have so many requests, how will Treble handle that, right? So the beauty of what we've built and the way that we've structured Treble is the SDKs essentially upload the data that you send to us directly through Amazon into an Amazon S3 buckets. There are no server, there's nothing. It's completely serverless from the SDK to the bucket. That's, for example, how we handle and how we're able to scale to infinity and beyond, if you will. And I would, if you're new to serverless, one of the problems that you face going serverless is, of course, trying to understand what is happening, because you lose some of the debugging features, you lose access to the local disk and some of these things. So using a tool like Treble when you're going serverless, using Amazon Lambda or something like that is invaluable, right? So you'll get so much more data about it than you usually would. And if you haven't still explored serverless, I would urge you to try that.
Sure, sure. So, like Dean, let us know in the chat section, did your question was answered or not? With that, we have like Ryan with his question. So he's asking basically like, is there an easy way to transfer like our Postman docs and APIs over?
Yeah, I mean, as far as you don't even have to transfer anything, just add our SDK on top of your API and let, make requests or let your users do the request. We'll get the documentation automatically. We'll give you everything, all the insights automatically. So you don't have to transfer anything, absolutely anything.
Oh, this like is really simple, I'd say. By the way, Ryan, yes, the record like this recording is like this basically webinar is getting recorded, and if you like want the recording, just let us know. Like email on support@pitchground.com, and we would just share the recording with you so that you can share this recording with your team. Because I personally believe those 10 commandments were very important, and everyone should learn about them. Also, let us know in the chat section, Ryan, did your question got answered or not? Other than that, we are Joginder. He's saying like, hi, first of all, thank you for your best practice. Thank you, Vedran.
So I think there's one question that's left that was kind of unanswered, and that is essentially from Jodinger about whether or not it is asynchronous or not. So essentially, when the programming language allows us to do async, we'll do async. If the programming language does not allow us to do that, we'll perform, the request as soon as you finish loading the request. So we do a couple of things. We latch on to the unshutdown methods of your programming language, which reduces the amount of impact we have on your API. Also, one of the things that we essentially do is we use a fire and forget approach, right? So you're not waiting for a response from our API, let's say API, in order we don't block your API from continuing to respond because we're using fire and forget. So all the SDK does is takes the data, sends it to us, and that's it. They don't care. You don't care what happens to that request. That way, we can speed you up. And the maximum latency we can have on your API is anywhere 10 to 20 milliseconds, right? And that's what essentially the beauty of serverless is. We can actually transfer a piece of information directly using Amazon's infrastructure through and through into S3 without ever touching a single server, a single database, anything. So that means we can take in 10 million requests in a minute. So yeah, are we able to stack or buy bigger plans? So stacking is something that we have not yet. The math on our side does not work both well there. So we don't support stacking at the moment in terms of PitchGround, but what you can do is, of course, on our website, buy bigger plans. So you can start with a PitchGround package. And again, we can, let's do this. If you guys have a need to essentially, have a bigger package, just reach out to the PitchGround guys. We'll give you a discount code for bigger packages, and you'll get a discount on all the bigger packages. But unfortunately, we cannot offer 2.5 million requests per month for the rest of your life for free. So yeah, the packages for PitchGround are mostly meant, if you're starting out, if you're on development, you're not sure of our product, use that. And then later on, if you have a need, the sky's the limit. We have clients who have like 30 million API requests per month and use Treble. No, there isn't a limit on requests per second for a single server. Again, the reason why there isn't a limit is because we are taking the data, moving it through a bunch of pipes into Amazon S3. No database, nothing, right?
Okay, so many interesting questions. Like it just tells that people are really interested in the product on the first place. They are really
Not
excited.
a problem.
Yeah.
If any of you have any type of problem or more questions, just feel free to ping me. You have my email now. I usually, if I'm not sleeping, I'm basically responding.
This is super cool. So guys, with that, thank you so much once again, Vedran, to like share all this knowledge, plus to explore the Treble platform in this much depth. That was really interesting. Guys, like in the chat section, once again, I'm just dropping, like the link of the website of PitchGround, so that if you would like to check out the plans, if you'd like to buy Treble, you can just click on the link and you can just buy it. As simple as that. And yes, if you have any other questions or doubts, you can always mail Vedran. Like he has just shared his official mail ID in the chat. If you just use this mail ID, ask so many questions that Vedran be like, oh my god, so many amazing questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Super amazing. I think so there is one more question. Okay, there's not a question. There's Jogen is like, once again, thank you so much. That was amazing. People are really loving you, I can say that.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Okay. And with that, Vedran, once again, thank you so much. Have an amazing night ahead of you. Like, have a great sleep, great dinner. And it was amazing, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, cool. I'll again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you, PitchGround, for organizing the webinar. Again, I hope you all learned something today. And if you have any feedback for me, how to improve, what should I focus on, what is interesting, including the presentation or the platform, just let me know, and that's it. So thank you all.
Super amazing. With that, guys, we'll see you guys another time. Till then, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.